Welcome back to Sermon Rewind. My name is Todd, and with me is Jordan back in his proper spot because this is the way we do things.
Good to be with you.
It's good to always keep doing the things that we've been doing for a long time the same way, right?
Rhythm and repetition.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we are still around the dinner table. Are we done?
No, we have one more week.
One more week.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's good because I'm getting full.
Good.
Can we go out for ice cream after?
Anytime.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think after this sermon, the following week, you should just take the week off. You could have like a congregational study hall.
Mm-hmm.
Just get up and say, okay, everyone just think for a little while about this whole series, write down what you learned
Yep.
and what you're going to do different.
What would be the fun in that?
Well, you wouldn't have to prep a sermon, and it would also be something where you put the onus on the people to...
That's fair.
Okay. So...
That's not going to happen, by the way, just throwing that out there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's time. Yeah. I can convince you. This week, the topic was apathy.
Mm-hmm.
Before we and the text was Revelation 3, verses 15 to 22.
Yeah.
Before I get to your big idea and the points, I could be wrong. I believe this is a late ad.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So this one is less, I would say, issue-based.
Depends on who you ask.
I suppose.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily vote on apathy per se.
Fair.
We vote on some other things. What spurred this now?
Honestly, probably personal reflection more than anything. I think you can look out sort of at your audience and know your community to a certain degree and assume that all the decisions you're making are maybe best with them in mind. Sometimes you also look in the mirror and say, I need to study and think and process and communicate something that is obviously affecting me as well. So personally, I think that's probably where that came from.
Okay. So your big idea, spiritual apathy is not a phase or a season, it's a poison, and we must be serious about addressing it in the church. And let me sort of start there because you talked a bit about how we kind of justify, as it were, a period of time. We even talk about it. I'm not feeling super energized. I'm not feeling super connected to God. I'm not feeling super excited about things.
Yeah.
And you were sort of making the point or making the argument that we can't really get into that mindset at all because that's just kind of a sign of a slow decline towards, for lack of a better word, apathy.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But people do kind of ebb and flow in their life.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
Spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, that sort of thing. So isn't it sort of fair to suggest that whether it's by our own approach or maybe just the timing of God, that we do kind of perceive that there are highs and lows as it is?
I think highs and lows, don't take this personally, I think highs and lows is a poor way of framing it in. And all I mean by that is highs and lows are normal, natural, no different maybe than apathy might be. However, highs and lows are relatively quick, right? Sometimes even down to a day, you'll have a myriad of them. Apathy, the ebb and flow of kind of livelihood or being lively and full of joy and vigor and everything, and then sort of steeping down into this season, if we can use the term, of just kind of being stuck, not feeling anything, not thinking anything, not caring. How you respond to that ebb depends on how long it lasts. And therein lies the thing for me. I'm not saying that you won't have those low seasons, right? You won't have those apathetic seasons of your life. You'll have them. The mistake we make is that assuming that because we have them, that we can just leave them alone and eventually they'll go away. There are some people that the ebb in that experience lasts 20 years, where their apathy drives them to the place where they haven't read the Bible and they can't even remember the last time, right? Or they haven't been in Christian community for a long time and they just allow the excuses to stack up for why that is. You've got people who've been out of the church, who've been out of the faith, who've been out of any kind of real Christian accountability for decades because they just assume, oh, I'll spring out of this at some point. For me, it has less to do with how normal and natural those ups and downs are, but how we react to them and how we let them linger sometimes far too long.
So let me just sort of insert a different question then, because when you talk about react suggests self-awareness, right? Are there people that don't know that they are in a rut?
Maybe. I'll give some charity to that. I think more often than not, we know. I just think we do. Yeah, you ask the person, right? How many conversations you have where someone says, "Oh man, to be honest, I need to get back in my word more," or "I haven't been to church in a while. I need to get my wife and we need to figure this out," right? Or you hear it in their tone, you know it from their own expressions. They know, they're aware of it. Very rarely is apathy the result of ignorance. More often than not, it is just the result of not feeling either way. Right? There's nothing in you sparking any kind of motivation to move out of it. So I do think there may be some cases where folks don't know exactly why they feel the way they feel or how they got here or even what it's called. But I would say by and large, most people know where they are when they're there, and they often know the answer to how they get out of it. But apathy is a tough thing to get back out of.
I might come back to that. We'll see. In your first point, you said what spiritual apathy is, and you were highlighting verse 15 and 16. You had very short fill-ins this week, very simple. And you were talking about, again, the passage talks about being hot or cold.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't want to be lukewarm, spit out of the mouth type of thing. So candidly, and it's interesting because we've had this conversation, would you prefer to have people just admit that they're cold to you? Like we've talked about this before. You invite, somebody to be involved in something, or you invite somebody to come out to, or you encourage somebody to do this or that, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And they come up with a variety of reasons why they can't, or, oh yeah, maybe will, blah, 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 change the subject, that sort of thing. Would you prefer, as a pastor, to just have people say, yeah, I know you just invited me to do this. I just don't want to.
Yeah, I would
I'm just not interested.
Yeah. And I think even Jesus, he says it himself, oh, that you would be hot or cold, right? I'd almost prefer you owning you being, frozen and rigid and immovable. I almost wish you would just own that, because we can go somewhere from there, right? And I would say the same for us. If you sat across the table from me and I said, hey man, there's a guy down the street who needs some help, come and help me out. And you're like, honestly, I don't have any excuses. I got nothing else going on today. I don't care. I would much rather you just be like, I don't want to do it. At least then we can go somewhere from there, right? We can address that head on. We can talk about that.
Sure.
But yeah, the nothing, the neutral, the beige, as I like to say, like there's not much you can do with that.
Fair enough. So I'll put you on the spot, as I am prone to do. You were mentioning how long you've been here, which I can't remember how long it has been, but you were sort of saying it in the context of what you've seen over that period of time.
Sure.
Right? There's exceptions to everything. As a general rule, do you see our church as more apathetic than sort of excited about things? Are we more on the lukewarm? Is there a critical mass in the lukewarm as opposed to there being some hot and cold, but is there an oversized mass of people in the lukewarm section?
I'm sure there is. And I say that because I'm sure every church has that group of people. I don't know that I could put my finger on a particular mass of people who are just kind of floating in the middle, because I would address that all day long if I knew that to be the case. I'm sure, and I'm pretty convinced I've probably met some that are, but I would also say to, a really affirming degree, there's a great deal of folks at Bethany that are white hot. And sometimes I think even more so than me by far. And there's an incredible just encouragement to me to have those folks around. But yeah, any church has that, we refer to it maybe as even a subset, right? Like a small hidden group that they are off the radar because they don't care to be on it. And maybe they don't even know how to be on it, right? They're just here. So yeah, I think Bethany probably has some of that. I don't know who it would be in particular, but
going back to me asking you about this topic,
mm-hmm.
There's a reason, again, and I'll re-ask you the question. Some of it has to be about the congregation, right?
Sure.
Sort of a vibe you're feeling, a tone you're feeling, that sort of thing, right?
I've been in pastoral ministry in some capacity for 20 years. I've never not had a sense that our churches had that. So I'm not trying to skate the question. I just don't know that I would say there's a unique concern happening here and now where Bethany is kind of bubbling over with this bland, neutral groups of people. I don't think that's the case. Sure, I think there definitely are people who are just straddling the fence, and they may not even know why. They're just kind of circling the toilet bowl. Man, my pictures here are terrible.
That's okay. That's all right.
Yeah, I think there's definitely people where that's the case. But yeah, I don't think Bethany, reflective from my perspective, I don't think Bethany is any more apathetic maybe than anyone else.
And I'm only asking the question, not again to just pin that on people. And I understand it's hard to quantify because this isn't exactly something that you very easily measure.
Yeah.
But I think, as you talked about, there's people that are white hot, that are super jazzed about the kingdom, about walking with Jesus. And then there's people that aren't. It feels like sometimes collectively as a church, we can sort of say, well, we've got a certain number of people that are all excited about doing stuff. So as long as those people are doing their thing, then I don't really have to step up that much.
For sure.
So, I mean, that's a challenge for people that are involved. And the flip side of that is if you are involved, if you are all in, if you do respond to calls, that sort of thing, we have to be careful that we don't then say, well, now I'm good, right? Because I'm definitely not apathetic because I'm showing up for all these things.
Right.
Right? So in your second point, you said how spiritual apathy happens, right?
Yeah.
And you were talking a little bit before about people in a rut, right? As a pastor, and I could ask you about Bethany specifically, but you could answer as Bethany or just general. Do you find sometimes there are people in the church who have kind of never been hot? Like their whole spiritual existence has been kind of lukewarm. Like maybe they've been around, they've listened to all the teachings, they would tell you that they believe things, they show up, but there is just a general lukewarmness about that.
Sure.
Have you found that to be the case? Is that something that we have to sort of guard against, particularly if you've been around a church setting for a long time?
Yeah. And the answer to all those questions are yes. There's a reason why when you look at like statistical analysis for the Christian church, for example, in America, there's an estimated nearly 30% of that number that everybody just kind of washes it out as cultural Christianity, right? People that they're in church because we're supposed to be. This is what Americans do, right? Or my parents were Christians and they went to church, so I must be a Christian and I go to church and I, know some scriptures and I know some things. Therefore, one equates to the other. But no, that's not always the case. So yeah, there's always an undercurrent of folks who are here and who are in kind of kingdom ministry, and they're not feeling it. Sometimes they honestly don't even know why they're doing it. I have had people tell me, well, I'm doing this because I'm supposed to. And then I'll ask them like, well, did you roll out of bed thinking about this at all? Well, no, I'm just doing my duty. This is what I'm supposed to do. So there is a sense in which you want to uncover some of that stuff, and you actually want to put people in positions where they have to address it, they have to talk about it, and they have to deal with it. That's not always well received. But yeah, you have to be cautious, right? Because there are people that I have found to be incredibly passionate, but are just very quiet, stoic, and sometimes not involved. And they are usually doing unbelievable ministerial things behind the scenes. They're just not necessarily out in the open about it. So you have to kind of figure out what is and what is not. And often it just comes up from a simple conversation. Hey, when was the last time, I'm curious, where you sat back and considered the depths of your sin and the just wonder of what it means for Christ to have willingly gone to the cross for you? And how are you feeling thinking about that? And when you have people that just go, I mean, yeah, it's whatever. I mean, it's great. Those are signs, right? When you have folks who say, oh man, I haven't read my Bible in probably 2 or 3 months. This is not judgment towards them, but listen to Peter's words in John chapter 6, right? Lord, in you alone are the words of eternal life. Where else could we go? This reality that washes over Peter is that I'm going to listen to everything you say. You're going to say crazy things, but I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to devour it. I'm going to do everything I can to mold and shape my entire life after it because I know what it is that I'm hearing. When you have people who say, yeah, I mean, I know it's the word of God, but I'll get to it when I get to it. That's a sign of a problem. And so our job is to come alongside brothers and sisters and say, hey, listen, I need this from you the same way that you'll need this from me. If you are seeing these signs in your life, don't just assume you'll roll out of it. You very well may not. And this could lead to much more devastating results in the end. Take very seriously the poison that you're ingesting or that's rolling through your system right now and deal with it accordingly.
So we always want to stay away from being just legalistic and being checklist Christians, right? Because someone might say, oh, well, I'm fine because I get up every day and I read my little devotional. And so, the scenario you're discussing of, somebody that hasn't read their Bible in a couple of months, well, that's not me. So I'm good, right? How do you, and you talked also about, the idea of when was the last time you sat back and really, truly pondered? Someone might say, oh, well, you kind of asked that question on Sunday. So I thought about it for a second while you were asking that, right?
Yeah.
How would you advise somebody, again, without it being just a checklist, but how would you say, what do you do in the morning? When you wake up in the morning, what is the mindset? Like, if you were going to give someone a tip or one question to ask that they should ask themselves every day to guard against whether they are kind of in a rut, because a lot of people are going to look at themselves and saying, well, yeah, I'm doing okay, right? I'm just living my life. I go to church every Sunday. I tithe. I haven't stabbed anyone this week. I wave to my neighbors. Everything is pretty good, right? I don't need to do anything really drastically
what a
different.
Crazy criteria.
Well,
you just
but
laid
you
out
understand
there.
what I mean,
Yeah.
right? I haven't done anything really heinous.
Yep.
And I've done lots of, again, good churchy things, right? But what's the question you ask yourself to really get under the surface, right? To say, am I really genuinely on fire?
Yeah.
Or is that just the question? Am I on fire or am I not?
Yeah, I mean, you can ask that, and I think people will respond a number of different ways to it. I always try to ask questions of people that don't necessitate an answer. It just shakes them a little bit in their core because they already know the answer to it, right? I had a really sweet old man in the faith years and years ago, and I used to give him a hard time because he would say the same thing all the time, and he was so absolutely off the charts excited about both his own redemption and the fact that he was convinced Jesus was coming back any minute. I mean, he was just so amped knowing that something was about to happen. And he used to use this phrase. He used to say, man, I can feel it in my bones. It is like the angels are coming. I can feel it in my bones. And we used to just crack jokes about it all the time. But what a great way of explaining a non-apathetic life. That doesn't mean that everybody needs to be shaking physically and everybody needs to just be sort of running around singing worship songs. This doesn't even have to do with your practices. Do you feel it in your bones? Your great just love for the Lord for what he has accomplished. Is it in you? I mean, are the hooks set? Are they in you? Like, can you, no matter what you're doing in life, is it hard to shake it? The joy and elation that's attached to this. Is it hard? I like to ask people that because I don't expect you to say anything. I want you to go, oh man, if I don't have that feeling, I'm jealous for that feeling. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that feelings alone dictate anything, because as we've talked about many times, you'll go through seasons of that. But by and large, when I talk to believers and I ask them, like, do you feel this in your bones? The people that feel it in their bones are like, oh yeah, that is exactly how I would describe it. I can't shake this. I wake up in the morning, this is what I want. I want Jesus to be here now. I want the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven now. I want the world to be redeemed now. I want my neighbor to know the love of Christ that I get to know every day now. When you start feeling it in your bones, you know what it's like to not. Very rarely will you have truly deeply set, spirit-filled believers who run through a season of apathy and don't have the slightest idea that it's happening. They know when the feeling in their bones is gone. This is kind of why King David says, Lord, take not your Holy Spirit from me. I've done a lot of really, really bad stuff, right? And I don't deserve any of this, but there's one thing I can't fathom the idea of losing. I can't, if I can put my own saying on it, I can't go a day without feeling it in my bones. If I don't know that the earth is trembling with redemption, I'm done. Take me out now. please don't take your spirit from me. If that's you, then you know. If that's not you, you call yourself a Christian, and you're like, I don't have any of that going on, then brother or sister, in love, like, get on your knees before the Lord Jesus. Something isn't right. That's what I would say.
Last question, and this goes with point number 3. The point was how spiritual apathy is cured. We've talked sort of about the internal, the things we ask ourselves. We sit before Christ and ask these questions. But we're a community, right? You are tasked as a lead pastor to preach the word, to issue challenges. A lot of times, this whole series has been a bunch of challenges,
Sure.
right? Hard questions, things for people to ponder. Not to unpack it too much, you and I got into a discussion on Saturday via text.
Yeah.
It started with you asking me to participate in a blood drive, right? And you and I have gone back and forth with this sometimes because we have similar things in that part of our vocation is, I don't want to say selling stuff, but I mean,
It is.
you're selling the word.
Yeah.
I'm a fundraiser, right? So I have to go after people's wallets, and I get tired of it sometimes. And I'm guessing sometimes you may get tired, maybe not of sharing the gospel, but occasionally you may just want to say, have I not said this a bunch of times already, folks? And I still have to ask you. So we were talking about the idea that I think you said to me that you can challenge me sometimes because I'm the loudest or I'm one of the louder people, right? When I get into a cause, I push it, and I push it hard,
Yeah.
right? And obviously that probably turns some people off. Apathy as a general construct is something that we have an opportunity to sort of shake each other out of. But it's not always going to be, oh, hey, Jordan, are you doing okay? That's great. Well, I would really encourage you to have a little better, day. As a brother in Christ, every once in a while I got to say, hey, man, hello, wake it up a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Get out of your own head,
Right.
okay? It's not about you. Stop moping, okay? You're not worthless. You're a child of God. You're being used, okay? Let's keep a little optimism here.
Yeah.
How do we do this as a community, right? Because we don't all have, you and I have a relationship. We've built a relationship of trust. We can chew on each other. We've gotten into some, differences of opinion, but we love each other, and there's respect and that sort of thing. But that's not everything that people feel in a church setting sometimes.
Sure.
Right? We want it to be nice, and we want it to be polite, and we want it to be friendly and warm. But getting people out of apathy sometimes is about, I don't want to say slapping upside the head, because violence is not the answer, but it's about being a little more direct, right?
Yeah.
You use the words reproof and discipline, right? So how do we create a community that affirms and loves and understands that people do have bad days and they're in bad places sometimes, but also says, hey, let's get going here, right? Let's get out of our ruts. And I'm sorry if that's offensive to you, but let's go. What does this look like?
It's so when I say this, I mean it. It's a tough thing, and the reason why it's a tough thing is not because we don't know how to address one another. It's that usually when we address one another, at least one party is not convinced that the other person truly loves them. And that's really the missing element. You talked about it just a moment ago. We can do these things. I could pull you aside and say, Todd, as your pastor and as a brother in the faith, I'm noticing a particular area of conduct or some apathy in your life that I really want to call you to the carpet on. You may not like hearing about it in the moment from me. Everybody's going to feel adversely at first. But like you said, we love each other, right? So you know that ultimately that's not coming from a place of judgment or malice or anything like that. And so you're prone to give it more thought. Likewise, if the person on the other side of that doesn't believe that you love them for whatever reason, it is only ever going to be absorbed as judgment and will then, as a result, be processed harshly. I've had people that have come up and told me after a sermon, it felt kind of like you were browbeating a little bit. It felt like you were angry at us in particular. And two things, I'll only apologize for that if in self-reflection I go, shoot, maybe I did go in there a little aggressive. But I won't apologize if what I honestly felt like I was doing in love was, as a brother, encouraging brothers and sisters to do the same thing I would want them to do for me. And I am, in respect, asking them to do for me. So a lot of times those conversations end up me being, do you believe that I love you? I'll just ask them. Like all jokes aside, I know this is going to make this really uncomfortable, but do you really, if I'm not around, can you say to somebody, you know what, one thing I really just appreciate about my pastor, I know that guy loves me deeply. I know he's there for me. I know he supports me. Do you believe that? And if they tell me yes, then my response to them is going to be, then take this in love. Let the prevailing relationship that we have articulate the meaning behind the words or the energy behind the words. So what ends up happening is we actually need to be just very clear and direct. There's no processes out there that are better than others. You just need to be clear and direct. But you can't do that if your people don't believe you love them. If the brothers and sisters in the church feel that our relationship is centimeters deep, right? That all we really have is a wink and a smile on Sundays, and that's it, then believe me when I say you have no business going to that person and trying to drag them out of an apathetic life, because you're not getting anywhere, because there's no belief that they love you. You've not done the groundwork first. So maybe the clarion call here is, church, love one another, not just in feeling, but love one another and outdo one another in good works so that the other person grows to know that you love them. Then we can be far more effective, in such a behavior between the two of us.
All right. Thanks very much.
For sure.
Thanks again for joining us on Sermon Rewind. We're here on Wednesday nights. Come for dinner at 5:45. We will discuss this at 6:30. And we hope that you are able to get out of a slump if you're feeling it this week. Thanks for joining us on Sermon Rewind.
See you soon.